And we are ready to begin.
Yay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Torn Book Club. It is yet another Sunday and yet another book discussion. I am Josh, your host, and with me is my friend Thomas Parham.
Hello.
He is your professor of sci-fi. Is that correct?
I'm, I'm the chair of the Department of Cinematic Arts at the Azusa Pacific University in LA, but I wrote my doctoral thesis on Star Trek The Next Generation, and I teach sci-fi even falls and fantasy odd falls, so
Okay.
it's an unofficial moniker.
Okay. So now you're doing sci-fi.
I'm doing Cold War sci-fi this fall.
That should be fun.
I had no idea that we were on the verge of starting a new Cold War with Russia. So
Right. Yeah.
it could be very interesting.
Yes, it could be indeed. Well, that should be a fun class. I wish I was still in college, and then I might be able to take it. Instead, we'll just talk sci-fi.
Definitely.
So this is our final episode for Sci-Fi Month. This has been a lot of fun for me to talk about one of my favorite subjects, sci-fi. As much as I love Tolkien and as much as I love fantasy, sci-fi is really where it's at for me. Obviously, since I work on Star Trek. And so we're going to be rounding out the month with a little bit of a discussion on our book of the month. I don't know how many of you have finished reading it yet. I just finished it this weekend. And we'll also be talking about futurism and utopia versus dystopia in sci-fi, and why some work better than others. And you gave me an interesting line earlier today.
Oh, the future ain't what it used to be?
Yeah. I love that line. That needs to be the title of something.
I love, was it an IBM commercial at the turn of the current century where it's Avery Brooks saying, "It's 2000, where's my flying car? I want my flying car."
Something like that, yeah.
Supposedly they have the technology for flying cars, they're just trying to figure out licensure. Do you need a pilot's license?
Yeah.
A driver's license?
I've seen like some of the tests of those things where it seems almost like they're like little Harriers.
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like George Jetson.
Yeah. I mean, I would totally love a flying car, but yeah, I sort of feel like you would need both a pilot's license and a driver's license for it.
Yeah, you think people are terrible drivers now.
Mm-hmm. And Temple is saying, I finished the book and I have issues with it. You know what, Temple, so do I. Well, we can talk about that later on. So just a couple quick things, like since it is the end of the month, the Rewrite Tolkien contest may be over, but if it's not, we'll just mention briefly, Rewrite Tolkien this month is The Hobbit in the style of Douglas Adams. And we've been getting some fun entries. I'm looking forward to going over those and selecting a winner that we will hopefully read next week.
What does the winner get?
The winner gets their entry read on the show. and bragging rights for a month. So what else is going on? So for next month, let's talk about next month real quick. It's going to be Literary Franchise Month. We're going to be talking about all the big, or many of the big, literary franchises that have crossed over from books into TV shows, into movies. And I'm trying to do a different series for each week. So next week is going to be Game of Thrones, which is going to be a lot of fun. That's another obsession of mine. The week after that is going to be Harry Potter, which Jan has told me, he sent me an email about. So I will read that after the show and get back to you. He's got some thoughts on it. And the week after that, I'm thinking probably The Hunger Games, another big one. And then, of course, rounding it out, we'll be talking The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Because, of course we are. And so what else is there? Brain fart. Oh, so So in choosing our book of the month for next month, I've sent the challenge out to try to choose what you think the next big literary franchise is going to be. And I I've got a couple suggestions. I've been doing some research. Some people have been coming to me with some choices, and I posted on the Facebook page what my top three are, and they're kind of subjective, but they're what I think are most likely gonna be a crossover. They'll most likely be the next big literary franchise. The first one is The Maze Runner. And it's another young adult dystopian action adventure. It's got a big fan base. Um, a lot of people are excited about it, and The Hunger Games and Divergent have both done very well. The Hunger Games quite a bit more than Divergent, but Divergent is still a good, solid. Uh, it's a franchise now. Like they're definitely going to do another movie. But the question is the Maze Runner one too many? Like, is it going to oversaturate? People are going to say, listen, we've already got two dystopian stories out there. Do we really need a third? Who knows?
Yeah.
The second one is Outlander, which is a book series which a lot of people have talked about. I personally have not read it yet. It's a very big series, and it's about time travel, and I think there's a romance element to it as well. And it's getting the TV show treatment on Stars later this year.
Oh wow!
And I've noticed there as many people are excited about it as they are angry about it because apparently the trailer had a lot of inconsistencies with the book that made many fans angry. Um, so we'll see. It might do very well. We might have another Game of Thrones on our hands. Who knows? And then the third one is my own personal pick, and it's really sort of the dark horse, and that's Miss Peregrine's School for Peculiar Children. And the reason I chose this one, it's a very bizarre story, but it's getting a movie next year directed by Tim Burton.
Oh jeez.
Now,
Does that mean Johnny Depp's in it then?
you know what? There actually might be a role or two he could be in that. That would be okay. But I think that this presents a really good opportunity for Tim Burton to. Temple is saying she's having some technical issues picking up the show right now. Right? Is anybody else having trouble watching the show? It seems to be going okay on my end. I don't know what's happening. So try just refreshing the page, Temple. Maybe that'll help. So we'll just keep pushing along here. Is there anybody on the Justin TV channel? Because if not, I'll shut that down, and then maybe we'll have. No, it's just me and Jan. Okay, you know what? I'm going to shut down the Justin TV feed, and maybe that will help. We shall see. So, Jan is saying when there's an ad, I switch to the other one. Uh-oh. Well, then you're going to have a problem, Jan, because I just turned off the Justin TV channel. There we go. So yeah, I think Miss Peregrine really has the opportunity to show, or it gives Tim Burton the opportunity to really do something more unique, like maybe more like in the style of Big Fish, which I consider to be one of his better and more underrated movies.
My two favorite Tim Burton movies are Big Fish and Ed Wood.
Love those movies, yeah. Those are probably my two favorites as well. Although, I have a soft spot in my heart for Batman. The first one.
The first one.
The first one. Batman Returns, not so much. But but yeah, I think this one could actually be like sort of a sleeper hit because it's weird enough and it's got enough of that Tim Burton sensibility to it that he could do some interesting things with it that only he could do.
Is it more of a kid's book than a YA book?
No, it's definitely a YA book.
Huh.
Like it's got some it's got some elements to it that are definitely like mature.
Okay.
Like Jan is saying, I really don't understand why Torn Tuesday doesn't use both as well. I literally couldn't watch it without issues every minute last time. Yeah, well, Torn Tuesday uses a different broadcasting system than I do, so I don't know. Take it up with them. So that's what I think are the front runners for the next big literary franchise. So I will choose one next week. If you have any suggestions, either put them up in the chat, post them to the Facebook page, post them to the Twitter, email me. Let me know what you think. I think somebody, maybe Temple, had mentioned another series at one point on the Facebook page that I looked into but couldn't really find much about. So that doesn't bode well. I think it's called 500 Kingdoms. You ever heard of that?
Never heard of
Mm-mm. So on to sci-fi.
Spelled the right way.
Yes, not like I call that sippy.
Yeah, which is slang term for Polish venereal disease.
Is it?
Syphilis.
Really?
Short for syphilis, yeah.
Oh man.
Obviously, somebody at Comcast, NBC, Universal didn't do their research about intercultural studies.
I guess not. Yikes. And I Stole the One Ring is here. Hello, I Stole the One Ring. Temple is saying she scanned through Miss Peregrine yesterday, and the photos are really fantastic. Yes, they really are. The cool thing about the Miss Peregrine book is that it has all of these like old vintage photographs in it of kids in like very bizarre situations. Like one is slightly levitating, and one is bending backwards, and
Neat.
and this is apparently like the main inspiration for the stories. Like the author Ransom Riggs, he apparently has a collection of thousands of these types of pictures.
Wow.
And so he's started molding a story around them, which I thought was really cool. And so throughout the story, he makes references to these pictures, and then in the book, you see the pictures themselves, and they are like very haunting. And I think Tim Burton could do some pretty interesting stuff with that. So. Temple is saying it's definitely a book that you want in book form, not in ebook form. That's very true. Jan is saying would be awesome if a comic book would be the book of the month. I've wanted to get into superhero comics for some time, but never had the time.
Watchmen.
Watchmen is a great one. Maybe we'll do that sometime. That's a great idea, Jan. I Stole the One Ring is asking which book. It's Miss Peregrine's School for Peculiar Children we're talking about, just briefly.
I love that title.
Yeah. Like when I first saw it, I was like, okay, so is this like some sort of Victorian era X-Men? Turns out I wasn't too far off. So we can talk a little. Let's talk a little bit about our book of the month, since it is the end of the month. Orphans of the Sky by Robert Heinlein, and Temple was saying that she had some issues with this book, and I did too. I thought it had some interesting ideas, but the execution was definitely of its time. It was written in 1969. One of the things that that I noticed, like especially towards the end, was basically the women in the book. It's all the main characters in it are men, first of all, which is what you sort of expect, especially from Heinlein.
Mm-hmm.
But then like they start bringing women into it towards the end, and basically they are screamy, whiny nuisances,
I know.
and like they are basically just ballast. Like it was very upsetting to read that because like um, the whole concept of the story um, was about uh, yeah, Temple was saying I did not like how the women were treated like animals. Yes, that's
Yikes.
definitely true. They were treated like animals. They were treated like a nuisance. Um, they were um, like the whole concept of the story is that there's this generational ship that was launched from Earth in like 2170 something, and was supposed to take 3 generations to get to its destination. And somewhere during the first generation, there was a mutiny, and basically caused a big rift between various members of the crew, which who then isolated themselves in different parts of the ship. And then we pick up the story about 2 generations later, and everything with the mutiny has sort of turned into this sort of religious fervor, and everybody sort of believes like they don't even know that they're on a ship at this point. Like they think the ship is their world, and you never go to this portion of the world, and you always stay here. And then one guy he decides he wants to check it out. He wants to go exploring. Meets people from the other side. They go exploring, and then soon, and like because their world, they have their own view of what happened, and then they go through. They go to another part of the ship, and then discover all of the ship's logs. They discover the cockpit. They discover the navigation room, and then slowly put 2 and 2 together, and which is they're a transport ship, and they're coming to their destination, and it sort of becomes interesting, at least from my perspective, how like you sort of see a mirror in this as to how like the sort of religion versus science aspect that we see today, because when he starts bringing this information to his to the people who run his society, they are adamantly against it. They say there is no possible way this can be a spaceship. There is no possible way that that we can be heading towards another planet. The stars are fixed. We are the world. Uh, and then when he presents them with like all the evidence of it, they are still pretty much like, no, this is not the way it is, and we are going to accuse you of heresy and execute you. and so then it ends with him like basically going on to the lifeboat with a couple people who do believe him, and they escape from the ship entirely, and go to the planet. But it's like it was kind of like sad because basically you've got this huge ship with thousands of people all still living in complete ignorance of their existence, and sort of happy with it. But yeah, like Temple was saying, it's very like she didn't like how the women were treated like animals, and I absolutely agree, because like towards the end when they're trying to escape and get everybody onto the lifeboat, the people, the main characters are basically like, ugh, do we really need to bring the women along?
Seriously?
Yeah,
Oh my
like,
gosh.
and they're like, yes, we really should. And then once they get there, they're basically screamy, they're panicky.
Stereotypical. Oh no.
Yeah, and basically the main character is like, listen, they're here. Let's just put them in a corner so they don't bother us. And like I was sort of like slapping my head while I was reading it. Like, really, this is how you're going to treat your women?
Obviously, Heinlein did not pay attention to what was going on in society around him when he wrote this.
Clearly not. But then, like David Gerald was saying, Heinlein stories tend to feel like you're reading one side of a two-sided argument, and this one definitely so. And Temple is saying women didn't even have names until men decided to name them. That's true. Yeah. So yeah, it was an interesting look back to how sci-fi used to be, and today it's like I would say sci-fi is definitely much more inclusive.
I hope so.
I would say like the more popular stories are.
I think it's interesting you were talking about the YA franchises that have the potential to break out. But if you look at them, a lot of them tend to be very female driven. I mean, you've got, you know, there's this paradigm of late where it's the heroine who's torn between two men that she gets to choose. You know, the good boy and the bad boy, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Although in most cases she tends to choose the good boy.
Yeah.
Because that's the safe choice,
which is why I like the Hunger Games, because like they try to create like that choice for Katniss, and Katniss is basically through the whole thing just saying, "Listen, I've got bigger issues to deal with.
I don't need a man to make me complete."
It's not even that. She's like, I can't be bothered with something so frivolous.
Seriously.
Which is really much more realistic, I feel. But I mean, it'll be interesting because we have the Hunger Games and Divergent, who both have female protagonists. The Maze Runner, however,
has a
male protagonist, but it's basically this very bizarre world that they live in, where it's like it's a bunch of guys who are chosen to be in this competition, but then everything gets shaken up when suddenly a girl is introduced to it. And what does that mean? So, I'll be interested to see how it plays out.
They had a special sneak peek during Teen Wolf last week.
I haven't watched Teen Wolf.
The guy who plays the best friend on Teen Wolf is the lead of Maze Runner.
Oh, okay.
Dylan O'Brien.
Okay.
But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because I think the core audience for a lot of these has been girls, and it'll be interesting to see if a male lead will cross over with them, and get more boys to see it. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I sort of feel like as strongly as the female audience has been for like the Hunger Games, I feel like there's a very strong male audience for it as well. Like it appeals to both.
I think they do a really good job. But man, whoever made the decision to cast Jennifer Lawrence in those movies, so smart, because the woman she's amazing.
She really is.
I showed my intro to film class a couple of scenes from American Hustle, but one of them was the confrontation between J-Law and Amy Adams, and
that's a great scene.
She's got it going on.
Yeah.
And the fact that
and you really can't like downplay Amy Adams either.
Oh,
she was great in that movie.
The whole cast is amazing. I wish one of them had ended up with an award, but it was a tough year.
It was, yeah.
But man, Jennifer Lawrence has the fact that she's had 3 Oscar nominations and 1 win. She's in her early 20s, and she had the #1 box office grossing movie last year, and there was no man's name above her.
Yeah.
She's
she's fantastic,
and she's got a good head on her shoulders. I hope she never changes.
Yeah, I know, really.
Doesn't get all Hollywood on us.
Well, my joke about Jennifer Lawrence is that she was actually a better Katniss in Winter's Bone than she was in the Hunger Games.
I would blame, at least my best friend's wife hates the first film and blames Gary Ross for screwing up the book.
Yeah, it was. I think. I sort of feel like the Hunger Games, the first one, was trying too hard to like sort of make itself unique.
That, and my biggest problem with it is it just looked cheap. And I don't care if that's the most money that Lionsgate had spent in a movie at that time, it still looked cheap.
Yeah.
Which thankfully the sequel did not look cheap, and Francis Lawrence did a much better job portraying that world. And
yeah. Well, yeah, I would agree. Like, because in the second one, PETA seemed like a much stronger character.
bingo.
Yeah.
The first one, he was such a wuss.
He really was.
Lori, my bestie's wife's, her theory is that Lawrence had to spend so much of that second movie fixing stuff that Ross either did wrong or didn't do at all in the first movie
Yeah.
to make PETA a viable character.
I would agree. Like, I mean, I also felt that in the books, PETA was a stronger character as well. Like, you got to understand his plight a little bit more. Mostly because, I mean, the books are all told from Katniss's perspective, so you're really only seeing it from her point of view. But in the second one, now that PETA really is much more of a part of it, like, you start to understand where he's coming from a lot more.
The thing that attracted to me, I mean, even though I have issues with the first movie, as do most people, the thing that fascinated me, though, was this notion of a dystopian future and the fact that they put our heroine right in the center of the action. And you can tell that the seeds of rebellion are being, directed toward her to be this quote-unquote savior figure to help lead the resistance or the uprising.
Right.
And I love that.
Oh yeah, I do too. And what I really like, and I know this is something that's going to be played out a lot more in the next movie, is the idea that she's so much of a symbol for the rebellion that now she is really more of a pawn in a political game rather than an actual rebellion leader, like she should be.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be interested to see how they play that out, because I think Julianne Moore is going to be playing President Coin in the third movie, which that's a fantastic casting decision.
I love Julianne Moore. Oh.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. But it talking about the Hunger Games brings up the idea of dystopia versus utopia, and why dystopia is so popular in sci-fi these days.
I wonder if some of it has to do with the world we live in. We see that here we are, the most powerful industrialized nation on Earth, and yet we are chock full of problems on the inside.
We are, and like part of me wonders if it also just doesn't come from our own fear of our own destruction. Like,
by destruction, do you mean corruption from the inside out?
Corruption from the inside out, attack from outside, like
a little of both.
Little of both. But I mean, especially over like the last decade, there's been this very strong theme of fear, like in our popular culture.
But I would argue that comes from, the seminal event of this century so far has been the 9/11 attacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's funny because I teach a lot of courses that contextualize what we're studying in recent history. But if you look at the 60s, all you need is love.
Mm-hmm.
Just, the individual movement.
Right.
The 70s is about distrust because Watergate and whatnot.
Right.
The 80s is about acquisition of wealth.
Right.
The 90s is about technology. And then when we started the aughts, the question was, what's this decade going to be about?
Right.
And then after 9/11, we found out it's going to be about fear.
It's going to be about fear, exactly.
And I think that's what's been driving a lot of popular culture in the past decade.
Yeah.
And not only just popular culture, just our everyday lives. I mean, TSA, it's amazing. We have all this bureaucracy, and we pay all this money for TSA. They have not thwarted a single terrorist attack.
No.
And yet, they've been a major inconvenience to everybody.
Well, I mean, it's like this idea of just reactionary.
We got to do something.
Being more reactive than proactive, and where does that take us in the long run? I think dystopian fiction sort of like tries to play that out to a point of either ridiculousness or where we could potentially actually go, like having a consolidation of power into a group of elites who then use all that power to subjugate everybody else in order to keep rebellion from happening, which is what the Hunger Games was all about.
But some people would argue we're already there. When the top, 400 people in the country
Yeah,
own more stuff than everybody else.
and I would agree with that, but at the same time, like you and I, we lead good lives. We're not totally subjugated,
True.
and we're definitely not part of the elite either.
Very true.
So I mean, it's sort of like it sort of feels like we're heading that way, and it does. It sort of feels like um, this idea of dystopia really sort of tries to explore whether or not we're capable of getting out of that before it's too late.
There's such pessimism. I think that's also what's driving it too.
There's a lot of pessimism, a lot of cynicism.
You've got all these. So many people are working so hard, barely just to make ends meet, and this gap between the rich and the poor keeps growing. We talked a little bit before the show started, but if you go back to the early science fiction, whether it's film, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, or in novels, H.G. Wells' Time Machine, this notion of class warfare and how it plays out. Some people would argue that, it doesn't manifest itself. We're not the Morlock and the Eloi, but are we really that far off?
Right. Yeah, like definitely, like in the Time Machine, like the Morlocks and the Eloi were sort of like just like the long distant correlation of like our own evolution if nothing changes.
If nothing changes. And even with, we talked a little bit about Blade Runner. Blade Runner is my favorite science fiction.
Oh yeah, I love Blade Runner
so much. My preferred version is number 3, the original director's cut, without narration, before Ridley Scott changed his mind about so much and started screwing with it.
Now, which is that the final cut, or is that the one before it?
Like he final cut.
Okay, because that's the one I have.
Oh yeah. Well, do you have all the discs that come with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The final.
So it's got like every version on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the final. When they used Benjamin Ford instead of Harrison Ford, it took me right out of the movie. It's like, you look a lot like your dad at that age, but I can tell.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
But even that kind of uses the metropolis as a touchstone, where you have the wealthy living far above, the common people.
Right.
And then you throw in the notion of, let's create a new class of people, these, replicants.
Right.
Who get to do the stuff we don't want to do.
Right. And so that's dystopia. And it is like, it's a very cynical way of looking at the world, where I think like utopian fiction, like say Star Trek or something like that, tends to take a very rosy-colored, very positive, optimistic look at the future.
There's a great line from the new Battlestar Galactica: "Bright, shiny futures are overrated." And Star Trek's interesting. Obviously, you work on it now. I used to work on it back in the day. But I don't know if you could do it, without, I don't want to get into the whole J.J. Abrams thing. It'll just raise my blood pressure.
Yeah.
And get us off topic. But I just don't know. The original Star Trek was such a product of its time, specifically the Kennedy era and the drive to put man on the moon, and all those movements of the 60s. And now, yes, we have revived it. We have extended the franchise, but I don't.
It is very different from what it was back then.
Yes, and I don't know if it really resonates with today's audiences like it used to.
I really don't know. Let's see. Temple is saying something. Although with dystopian stories, there's always the possibility of something better at the end. Many dystopian stories have endings with an element of hope.
That's true.
That's very true, and that's something we didn't really talk about.
Conversely, usually the utopian stories almost always have the notion that there is something wrong in the system,
right?
And it's only utopian for those who are in the right place,
right? It's like, well, I mean, I think Star Trek really explored that brilliantly in Deep Space Nine.
Oh, absolutely. But again, Deep Space Nine wasn't really a product of. Some people would say it's anti-Star Trek because they're not moving. They don't all get along.
Yes, this is true.
But for me, that's my favorite of the new Star Trek shows.
I agree, because one of the problems that I think arose with the Next Generation was that it it was very adamantly trying to stick to the utopian idea of the original series.
There's that line from,
but in the 90s, when people weren't buying into Utopia as much.
There's a line from the first season finale, The Neutral Zone, where they encounter these people from suspended animation.
Right.
And there's a line where Picard said, "We have eliminated war, want, hunger, need, and anything else that creates dramatic conflict."
Yeah. Pretty much. And like I was just rewatching Time's Arrow, the one where the Mark Twain episode.
Oy.
Yeah. Not a great episode.
No.
But like it really sort of like hit home to me, just like how they weren't able to like really go into detail with it, because there's this one scene with Troy and Samuel Clemens where he basically challenges her, saying like you live in this world where there is no hunger, there is no poverty, there is no money, everybody gets along. I come from a world where the powerful have to gain their power from stepping on the backs of the poor. So, and you're telling me that all of that is gone now? And Troy says, yes. And Mark Twain is just like, okay.
The real Mark Twain would have called her on that.
Yes, exactly. The conversation would not have ended there.
Yeah, but
that really bugged me.
As it should have, because it wasn't. It didn't feel right in terms of the character, and
it did. It was a great opportunity to really sort of explain, like philosophically, how this world exists,
yes,
or what this world really thrives on. But instead, we're just left with that's the way it is.
And I think that's a problem that's endemic. It pops up throughout the run of TNG, but especially in those first couple of seasons where they're just like, let's go to the planet with the black people. It's like, you should have no vaccine and no Lieutenant Yar. It's like, oi.
Oh, God. Yeah, that was a painful episode.
Jonathan Frakes refers to it as, quote, a racist piece of trash, end quote.
Yeah, it kind of was.
It's terrible.
Yeah, that first season, like, it's got some really good stuff in it, but it was definitely, like, there was certainly a conflict of, like, trying to get past the ideas from the 60s and create something unique for the 90s.
Yeah. Although, ironically, one of my favorite episodes of that season is Yar's final episode, Skin of Evil.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting because even though the villain is kind of, Armus is this, nebulous tar baby.
Yeah, he's a tar monster thing.
Black Metamucil thing. It introduces the notion of somebody who does not have values with our main characters. And you've got that disconnect. And they can't deal with it.
Yeah. And the other thing that I liked about that episode was that basically Yar just gets killed, like no preamble.
Like she's a typical red shirt.
Like she's a red shirt, yeah. Like just gets thrown off to the side and she's dead. And that's it.
Yeah. Although that funeral scene is moving.
It is still a very moving funeral scene.
I think Denise Crosby said if the character had been written that well the entire season, she wouldn't have wanted to be written out.
There were other reasons she left, but yeah. And Temple is saying season 1 was trying too hard to be classic Trek.
Yeah.
And it absolutely was.
And the biggest
they had a lot of the writers from classic Trek on there for season 1.
And the biggest problem is classic Trek is a product of the 60s, and if you're preparing something for the late 80s, 90s, the world is not the same.
No, the world is definitely not the same. The sensibilities are not the same. And like you just sort of see like from the 3rd season on in TNG,
absolutely,
like things did sort of evolve a bit more. I was just watching an episode of Rascals, which it's a goofy, stupid episode, but it's still a whole lot of fun.
It's fun.
But I mean, what was so funny is like in season 1, you have Captain Picard, who is like the very stalwart, officious, noble captain, and who can do no wrong,
but he hates kids.
But he hates kids, yeah. And then, but as they like sort of evolve him later on, like you start to realize that he's an archaeology geek.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this great scene in the beginning with Picard and Guinan and Keiko and Ensign Ro all in shuttlecraft. They're coming back from shore leave, and Picard is sitting there with a duffel bag full of like old archaeological artifacts, and he's just going on and on and on about it, and like he's just geeking out over it like hardcore. And Guinan finally turns to him and says, "We were on a beautiful planet, and all you wanted to do was rustle around in caves." And he's like, "It's where I have fun."
To each his own.
Yeah. And so it was fun to see them like sort of expand Picard, like it was trying to make him more human a little bit.
Absolutely.
Like this is a guy who can geek out over something. Like, and like the best Picard moment I think in the entire run of the series was in season 4, the first episode, Family.
Oh, I love that episode.
Where he goes
back to Le Bar, France.
He goes back to France and basically has like a knockdown, drag out fight with his brother.
Mainly because he's so broken.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so glad that they let that arc continue one more episode.
Yeah,
because
I was too.
One of the problems with classic Trek is something would happen in an episode, and the next episode you'd never know it.
And that was one of the problems that they had like for a long time with TNG, was because it was a show that was made for syndication, which meant it was going to be shown out of order. So every episode had to be self-contained, and so it caused a lot of problems where they couldn't have arcs. And so it really wasn't until season 4 when they started like finally referencing back to other things.
Bingo.
And I really love like that moment where he's fighting with his brother, and he finally just breaks down and like says, "I wasn't strong enough." And
I love the brother's line. So the mighty Jean-Luc Picard is a human being after all.
exactly.
Sibling rivalry.
Yeah. And the other thing that I loved about that episode was it was the only time that you ever saw Picard actually entertain the notion of leaving Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was considering leaving to go on this to work on this science project or
this expedition with his friend Lewis.
Yeah.
No, the
But like we were talking about Deep Space Nine and how that one really brought in 90s sensibilities, I think.
Well, not only, I mean, the thing I love about Deep Space Nine is you have the allegories of Israel and the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
You have allegories of the Holocaust with the
Cardassians,
and the Bajorans.
Yeah.
Mix that all up with this notion of nonlinear aliens and this celestial temple, which is a wormhole in our terms.
Yeah.
And this man of science thrust into this position of being a religious icon.
That's one thing
for
that
a
I really
civilization he knows nothing about.
Yeah. It's like, that's one of the things that I love with Sisko is like the very first episode, like he's basically told, "You are Bajoran Jesus."
Well, you are the emissary of the prophets. And he's like, say what?
He's like, "I don't know what the prophets are. I barely understand your society, let alone your religion.
Check, please.
And now I'm your Jesus."
Although I love that episode, I actually showed the pilot to my class last year. And it holds up pretty well because it's got that great sci-fi concept, but it is totally coupled with this personal story of this guy who is...
He's a single father.
He's a single father traumatized by the death of his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the non-linear aliens have to tell him, if you are linear, why are you still here?
Yeah. And like I thought that was a great exposure to the nonlinear aliens in that first episode. I sort of feel like as the stories went along, they didn't quite hold up as much.
Yeah. Although, to its credit, over the 7 years, when at key points they did come back to that notion.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean for Sisko to be the emissary?
Right, and they did, but at the same time, I sort of felt like towards the end, they sort of felt like they were being more linear.
Yeah. Well, the power race kind of. It's I got red contact lenses. I'm evil now.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the power rates really were like, they felt unnecessary.
Is that Temple who says when stories are made personal, they tend to be more universal?
Mm-hmm.
That's the truth.
That is very true. Yeah.
One of my favorite TNG episodes is season 5, The First Duty, when basically Wesley commits an honor offense at Starfleet Academy.
Yes.
And Picard just reams him.
That is still one of my favorite Picard speeches. Like, the first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth,
Whether it be in scientific truth.
historical truth or personal truth. And
Wow.
yeah, but I mean, like, and Wesley like understood, and he admitted to it.
Yeah.
And
And the chips were down.
yeah. And I know that the actor who plays the guy who really took the brunt of
Nick Locarno.
yeah. The actor, he went on to play Tom Paris
Right.
in Voyager, and I remember originally Tom Paris was supposed to be Locarno.
Yeah.
Like, they were supposed to continue that story. Like, he got into more trouble, and he was in prison, and he was just a bad seed.
The rumor I heard is they didn't want to give a character payment to the writer of the episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But evidently, on his personal file that shows up on screen, one of Tom Paris's aliases is Nick Locarno.
Really? Interesting.
Crazy.
It's been a long time since I watched Voyager.
I wonder what a utopian sci-fi, whether it's made for TV or for a novel, would look like that was generated now.
You know, it would be interesting. Like, I've often wondered what a utopian world in today's sensibilities would look like, and it is kind of hard to formulate one. I think just because there is so much cynicism and pessimism in our world, like, anything good happening usually is accompanied by some naysayer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would be it's very hard to achieve utopia when you have that. Like, I mean, I deal with it like regularly from Star Trek fans, which I find bizarre. Because like I will tell people like, hey, I work on Star Trek, and while there are some who are like, oh man, that's so cool, this must be a dream job for you, and I'm like, yes, it is, and others will say things like, oh, well, if you actually work on Star Trek, then you're not really a fan.
That makes no sense.
No, it makes absolutely no sense. Like, apparently, like, you're only a fan as long as you keep your distance from it.
Oh, gee whiz.
It's like that same. It's like it's kind of like this weird like fan
touch.
This fan twist on the hipster idea of if you make money doing something, then you're a sellout.
Oh, jeez.
It's like if you actually make money working on something you love, then you're not actually a fan of it.
It's interesting. One of the books I used for my cinema ethics course talks about the two great dystopian novels of the 20th century, which are Orwell's 1984 and then
Brave New World.
Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and the fact that they both have this dystopian future, but in 1984, that which we hate, which will destroy us in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And in Brave New World, that which we love will destroy us.
Interesting.
The book is Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, who is a great media critic of the 20th century.
Okay.
But it's fascinating. One of the conclusions that Postman comes to is that we are much more in the Huxley camp, that which we love will destroy us.
It's interesting.
And I would say reality TV is prime candidate of it. I'm not a fan of reality TV, aside from the fact that it takes away jobs from friends of ours who actually write shows and can act in them and direct them and produce them. But reality it's just this freak show where everybody thinks that if I behave badly on television, which whether it's Survivor or The Bachelor or whatever, anything on MTV, Jersey Shore, blah blah.
Well, I mean, The Bachelor is like more popular now than it has been in years because The Bachelor himself was such a misogynistic jerk.
Well, he's such an idiot. All those seasons that show and The Bachelorette have been on, and what, 2 stable relationships have been produced out of those?
Yeah.
It's like, but I don't know. Are there any great shows about ideas anymore?
About ideas? No, they're really more about situations more than anything else. Like I'm trying to think of one. I mean, of course, there's Cosmos.
Well, Cosmos is, but that's untypical.
Cosmos is about as atypical as you can get for today's
How
programming.
are the ratings for that doing?
I think they're doing okay.
It has such an eclectic pedigree. You've got Sagan's
Yeah.
widow,
Mm-hmm.
Seth MacFarlane from Family Guy, and Brandon Braga from Star Trek. It's like, okay, who would have thought to bring these people together? And then Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's awesome.
Yeah, well, Neil deGrasse Tyson, as far as I'm concerned, can do no wrong. But no, what's interesting is like they're really big fans of this sort of thing. Like, because Seth MacFarlane, first of all, is a huge Star Trek fan, so he's been in chatted with us a bit, and I've talked with a lot of the writers from Enterprise because we were doing the Blu-rays for Enterprise along with TNG, and what I found interesting was like a lot of them are actually working on Cosmos right now.
Oh wow!
And they're all really into it. Like Seth MacFarlane, not the least of which, he is seriously into it. And I kind of love the idea that like you have some people who have enough clout that they can revive this very intelligent work and bring it to today's sensibilities and still keep it just as intelligent.
On Fox of all channels.
On Fox of all things, yes.
Go figure. On Fox.
But I mean, I'm loving Cosmos.
I am
you.
too.
Yeah,
I'm loving the production. You know, just the enhanced production design. I love the tips of the hat too, Sagan, and the clips of him from the original show.
Yeah.
But in terms of great, you know, like I just don't know if there could be I think our generation is so jaded and cynical with everything we've seen. I don't think we're going to get another great utopian thing. And I think that these discussions and ideas to revive Star Trek, I don't think it's going to really work.
I don't think Star Trek can be revived the same way.
No.
I mean, I think it could be revived, but again, it's going to have to be like, I hate to say it, it's going to have to be like that dark, gritty version, like J.J. Abrams was trying to do.
Oh, that was supposed to be dark and gritty.
Yeah, I know, right?
In an Apple store.
Yeah. But I mean, like, it's more spectacle than ideas.
No, it's just about making money.
Yeah.
I don't think there's not many big ideas there.
No. The new Star Trek movies are definitely about action set pieces and big spectacle explosions, but
strip mining the franchise's history to make
we've talked lots and lots on this show about the Star Trek movies,
okay.
So I don't want to get into it again.
Easy topic.
It's a very easy target. But yeah, I sort of feel like it could be done, but it needs to be done like in just the right way, and maybe even like making it dark and cynical is sort of like a gateway to get people interested in it, and then turn it on its head and say, oh, by the way, everything is awesome.
Lego movie.
And actually, like the Lego movie, I would think is
I love the Lego movie.
It has some great ideas about just like the power of the imagination
and the power of story.
Yeah, and no, I love the Lego movie. Like I can't get enough of that thing.
Oh, seriously, and that's that Mindworm song. Everything is awesome.
Oh God, no! It's gonna be stuck in my head the rest of the day. Okay, I need to think of the Batman song. Darkness, no parents.
Whoever thought of casting Will Arnett as Batman? It's like
absolute genius. Absolute genius. After I saw that movie, I was like, you know what? Get rid of Ben Affleck. Put Will Arnett in that role. I want to see Will Arnett be Batman.
Will be fine.
You know what? I have no problem with Ben Affleck as Batman. I think he'll be just fine.
He'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. So we are getting close to the hour. We're about 5 minutes from it. So
you just have to wonder what the next. I mean, we're now in the teens.
Right. Yeah,
almost halfway through the teens.
Yeah, we're in the second decade of the 21st century.
I wonder if there'll be a new big issue for this. I'd like to think that we can hopefully. I mean, terror will always be present, but I'm hoping that there will be something else that will emerge as the dominant theme for this decade.
I'm hoping. Like, I sort of feel like we're reaching that point where we're being hopeful and being positive is gonna, for lack of a better term, make a comeback. Like, I sort of feel like society, as bitter and jaded and cynical as it is actually really yearning for some positivity.
I think they are. I think that
Which is why something like the Lego Movie did so well,
seriously.
because it was a very happy movie.
It was a very happy movie. Yeah, you just wonder what it will take for people to realize, life's not that bad overall.
No, it's really not. And I think like there's a lot of people who are starting to come around to more positive ideals. I think.
You might get those silver lame jumpsuits after all, Josh.
Oh, wouldn't that be great? Then I don't need to worry about coordinating anymore.
In the year 1997, the family Robinson embarks on a mission to Alpha Centauri.
Lost in Space references. But yeah, I think that I think that we're slowly starting to enter an era of wanting idealistic utopian fiction again, only because we're so saturated by pessimistic dystopian fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always a yearning for something different and something quote unquote unique, even if it is just a revival of something that was popular decades ago. And so I think that we could see some more utopian fiction in the future. I personally hope so. Maybe that's my own personal subjective look at it.
I'll be interested to see if somebody comes up with one.
Mm. All right. Well, I have my writing assignment then.
Yes, Josh, you must do it. You can save us from ourselves.
Yes. So that's gonna bring us to the end for this week. This has been a really fun sci-fi month for me. I hope it has been for you. Thank you, Tom, for coming for this final episode of Sci-Fi Month. And
thanks for having me, Josh, and others.
And thank you, everybody in the chat, for participating. Temple, Jan, I Stole the One Ring, Eva. Is that everybody? I think so. And I will see you again next week for the beginning of Literary Franchise Month. And we will be discussing Game of Thrones, and we will not be doing book spoilers. So if you have, and anything that you've seen on the show is fair game. Anything from the midway point of book 3 on, we're not going to talk about.
So season 3 was only half of book 3.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And Temple is asking, will next month's book be announced next week? Yes, it will. I'm still deciding on which one we'll ultimately choose. If you have any suggestions, feel free to send them my way. I'd love to look into them and see what we come up with. I've got my own ideas for what I think the next big franchise will be, but I'd love to get your take on it too. So next week, yes, we'll be talking Game of Thrones. And we'll also be reading the winner for Rewrite Tolkien. So we'll have a little bit of sci-fi next week as well, with a Douglas Adams version of The Hobbit. And I'll need to work on my Stephen Fry voice. So thank you all again for coming this week. I will see you next week. I'm looking forward to another great month of fun discussion. So I will see you all next week, and never stop reading.
Goodbye.